there has been a lot of advancement where internet by and large is now accessible to people with disability. But again, Indian news and websites continue to be an exception for this.
This inspirational story is something that is very discouraging, because if a blind person is able to take up a job, you will see, oh my God, blind hote hue bhi job mil gaya, and those kind of attitude.
What are the kind of barriers one has to face in daily functioning of life because these services are not accessible?
According to the World Health Organization, almost 10% of the population has a disability in India and each and every country. So you can imagine it's a very, very big number. I cannot even give you example of even one news portal or web app that is actually accessible. So I want to really congratulate Newslaundry on the initiative that you have taken. So I learned about it just today and I'm so pleased. Probably this is the first such initiative by any media house to make their website and apps accessible. So I'm actually very, very pleased and just looking forward to being able to use at least one website and one app.
Lot of deaf people actually lost money because they did not know demonetization had happened, because sign language of such a important news was not there. And it's like appalling to see, like if you go to UK, US or any of these European news websites, they are fully accessible by compliances. So it's very important, because we are also equal citizens of our country and need to know important information.
People who have disability, they have to live their life since the point when they wake up until the clock when they sleep. Suppose there's a red and green color given in a pie chart. So for me, it's fine. But for a blind user, color doesn't exist. Shape, sizes do not exist. Like, how to give that information? So here we need to ensure like the information is not only reliable on the color, and as well we need to take care of a different disability, that is like color blindness.
Thank you everyone for coming in. I still remember when we were sort of putting together the agenda for this year's Media Rumble. This was the first session. Accessibility was the first session we sort of narrowed down. So very excited to see the turn up for this session. So even if we take the most conservative estimate, and I know the panelists here will tell you how underreported this number is, but there are at least 25 million people in India who face in some sort of disability. And whenever we are thinking in terms of product or in tech, this is a large chunk of a population that we don't see as a user base. But the good thing is that technology is a great leveler. Thanks to smartphone, thanks to assistive technology, there has been a lot of advancement where internet by and large is now accessible to people with disability. But again, Indian news and websites continue to be an exception for this. I have a personal bias here. This is a subject that I'm deeply curious about because our team for a good part of this year has worked on making the Newslaundry app and website accessible. It launches next month. We are going to play a promo after the panel. But the idea right now is, and we were briefly talking about what to sort of discuss for the panel, is to make you understand how frustrating it is to be a person with disability and use a digital experience, a website or an app that is not accessible. And more importantly, how we as news professionals, what can we do to make our news websites, our apps, our products a lot more accessible? And I don't think we could have had a better panel because between Shakul and Prashant, both of them have extensively worked on assistive technology. They help companies make their products and website accessible. We have Sunayana here, who works as an accessibility engineer. We're one of the largest cloud computing companies in the world. And we have Vineet, who runs this platform called Atypical Advantage, which is a livelihood platform for people with disability. To some of you, Vineet might seem very familiar because he's just recently successfully pitched and raised money on Shark Tank. So thank you everyone. Thank you everyone on the panel to take out the time. Shakul, if I can start with you, because like we were discussing, I want everyone in this room to understand how frustrating the experience can be. So two-part question. If you could tell us under a minute, what exactly do we mean when we say the word accessibility? And what has your experience been when it comes to using Indian news and website? How accessible or non-accessible they are?
Thank you so much, Chitranshu, for asking this very relevant question. Just to sum up, accessibility is basically mean that your website or portal is barrier free so that people with different needs can actually access it. For example, if someone who's blind or visually impaired, so like for example, I am blind, I use something called screen reader, which is a software that lets me navigate through my computers, which reads out everything on the screen. But again, it's a technology, so it may have some barriers, right? So if your platform is made compatible with these sort of assistive technologies such as screen reader to work with, then it is called accessible. So in simple word, if it is barrier free, if anyone and everyone can use it with the simplest of interface, that is called accessibility. Now, coming back to your second part of the question, how accessible Indian news websites and portals and news in general is, the answer to is almost nothing is accessible. I know it's kind of a harsh truth, but this is what it is. Like, it's very frustrating for us as people with disabilities. I've had several friends who have subscribed to several newspapers. They have taken several subscriptions, but when they try to read / access these newspapers or go to their website and try to read these articles, more often than not, they are unable to do so. And I mean, there is a reason behind it, and I can sum this up in three major points. Number one, there is a lack of awareness around accessibility and needs for people with disability, and this happens because media has really not seen people with disability. So the second reason is there's lack of representation, and I'm sure Vineet and Sunayana are going to be talking more about it, so I'm not going into the details. And the third and the biggest reason is that lack of clear mandate. However, India has something called RPWD 2016 Act, which basically recommends you to make your offerings accessible. But unlike America or unlike the upcoming act in the Europe or European Union, we don't have an act or a law that mandates news or any organization / corporate / companies to make their products and offerings accessible for people with disabilities, and that is why it is not accessible. Another bigger reason, which I talked about in the beginning, is the lack of awareness and understanding. I don't think media ever considers people with disabilities as their consumer, right? And there's the biggest problem because they don't see them around. The way media portray people with disabilities is completely different. It's a charity model, or even if you would have seen like how people with disabilities are represented within the medium. Even if they do their daily chore, they are considered an inspiration. This inspirational story is something that is very discouraging, because if a blind person is able to take up a job, you will see, oh my God, blind hote hue bhi job mil gaya, and those kind of attitude. So that is why, because they don't consider them as their consumer, they don't really talk about it, and there is no representation within the newsroom, and hence most of the products are inaccessible. Some of the biggest accessibility barriers, for example, most media is ad driven. So the ads and pop-ups, and over here I'm not even talking about accessibility laws and those kind of stuff, which I'm sure others will talk about. So yeah, most of them are inaccessible.
Great. Prashant, same question to you, but if you could elaborate the answer by giving us specific examples. And so, for example, you were telling me that how a lot of civil service aspirants who have visual impairment, right? They often subscribe to news organizations, newspapers, and when they subscribe, they find out that the website in itself is not accessible enough. They've often written to companies, but they've never heard back. So if you could give us a few examples again for the room to understand what are the kind of barriers one has to face in daily functioning of life because these services are not accessible.
Yes, of course. Thank you. First of all, so I want to really congratulate Newslaundry on the initiative that you have taken. So I learned about it just today, and I'm so pleased. Probably this is the first such initiative by any media house to make their website and apps accessible. So I'm actually very, very pleased and just looking forward to being able to use at least one website and one app. So really congratulate you on that. At National Association for the Blind, where I am the General Secretary, so I am in touch with like thousands of visually impaired in particular and deaf-blind and multi-disabled of all age groups. And yes, many of them are students and growing up, aspiring for jobs, preparing for competitions. So, and then many of them are working as well. They are also citizens of the country, they are also voters, and they want to be aware of what is going on around them. So, so unfortunately, now the news mostly has become digital, and most websites and apps, unfortunately, are not working for people with disabilities. Here, actually, I would also just like to deviate a little and just maybe just clarify for the audience that first of all, this is a problem faced by a very large section of the society. So, according to the World Health Organization, almost 10% of the population has a disability in India and each and every country. So, you can imagine it's a very, very big number. And then, these people, a vast majority of them, millions of them, are able to make use of the latest advancements in assistive technology, and they are able to use the internet, they can use the computer, smartphone. A totally blind can do almost everything on the computer and smartphone. Even a person who is severely paralyzed, who cannot use hands, feet, cannot speak, they also have now technology tools to be able to use a website and app. But there is one condition. That website or app should have been designed according to the best practices and in accordance with the standards which are there. There are international level standards, there are Indian level standards. So just because, as other speakers said, people with disabilities are not considered as a consumer, so their needs are not taken care of. So because of that, these tend to be inaccessible. Inaccessible means Shakul is an expert. He can use the computer all right. He can give you fantastic documents. He can do any kind of data processing, but he may not be able to use a particular news website, unfortunately. So it's not his fault. It's not the lack of technology tools or anything. It is just that that website was designed. While designing it, it was never tested against the standards, never tested with technologies. So I am visually impaired. My wife is totally blind, and we are working. We are managing several things, and we have to be aware of what is going around us. So a good example is the COVID period, and one panelist also mentioned the demonetization. During those times, all governmental announcements were so important. What to do, what not to do, what are the restrictions, very limited sources of like shopping, banking and food and all. So all those used to come through the digital means, and many of our friends and colleagues, they were not able to get that information. They were having to depend on others. So yeah, it's a very big real problem. And I'm struggling to, I cannot even give you example of even one news portal or web app that is actually accessible. And when I say accessible, as I told you, like it's not compliant to the standards. It doesn't work with the assistive technologies, and it doesn't work for blind people. It doesn't work for some hearing impaired and many other persons with disabilities.
Correct. Vineet, I want to come to you. Like Prashant said, that people with disability are not seen as a consumer base. The way I see it, this is a huge business opportunity, right? Because it's a large section of a population. Like I said, even if we take the most conservative numbers, these are 25 million people, right? So if you're designing a product or if you have something out in the market, this is not a small segment to miss out on. Yesterday I was watching your Shark Tank pitch, and there you were talking about how you ended up starting Atypical Advantage. And the entire idea was for, again, people who don't know, Atypical Advantage is essentially a livelihood platform which people with disability can use to access different jobs and opportunities. And now you were talking about that all the existing recruitment platforms that are there, they are not accessible, right? Which to me does not make a sense, right? Because if today I, as a founder, I am starting a recruitment platform, why would I start where I'm excluding such a large section of population? So because you are an entrepreneur also, do you think this is just ignorance also, or we'll obviously come to the representation? Because for me, from purely business, it does not add up.
No, absolutely true. And very few people realize it. Like, for example, if you go, first of all, it's the right thing to do as a user in terms of accessing news. I think the fellow panelists have already told the importance of it. Like, a lot of deaf people actually lost money because they did not know demonetization had happened, because sign language of such a important news was not there. And it's like appalling to see, like, if you go to UK, US, or any of these European news websites, they are fully accessible by compliances. So it's very important, because we are also equal citizens of our country and need to know important information, so it's the right thing to do. But even when we started our recruitment platform, it was inaccessible, and that is why we launched a separate platform altogether, which essentially is exclusion, because inclusion would be if all the mainstream media outlets inbuilt for accessibility, which is for everyone. And just imagine, even from a business sense point of view, I used to work in retail, and we had this shopping assistance for people with disabilities, and their wallet size, like the ticket size, was 3x higher than non-disabled shoppers. And same way here for people with disabilities, when you go out of the way to make it accessible, the stickiness probably is higher, because none of the media outlets are accessible. And if anyone goes out of the way, the word spreads very fast in some of these close-knit communities of people with disabilities. For example, whenever we do sign language versions of our jobs, it goes way higher in the deaf community. And so it obviously makes business sense, but I would also say it's the right thing to do. And as equal citizens, this is something which all news platforms should look into it, to see what best we can do to access it. And nowadays, with mainstream technology, I'm very sure everyone is aware that we as blind individuals can access the smartphone and the computers the same way as anybody else can. Like, imagine a simple thing in universal design, which is a dot on your 5 button, or a F and J has a dot on your computer, has given me freedom to type on my computers on my own, withdraw cash from my ATM on my own, use, like today I was in the hotel room, and because there was a dot in the 5 button in the telephone, I was able to dial whatever number. Very simple thing, but it helped me as a blind user in any of the hotels across the world. So it is simple and it's easy to do, right thing to do. So yeah.
Sunayana, I want to come to you because I know a lot of engineers who've later on learned accessibility and they've taken certificates. But you had a very interesting career where through your career, you worked on accessibility. And you've often worked in larger companies where they have people with disabilities who can actually test the product, help them in brainstorming and so on and so forth. One of the words or one of the things that we really talk about in product is empathy, right? Like, if you're designing a product that should reach as many people as possible, you have to understand what the end user wants, right? Or what her needs are. Now, I've in my research, I've found that a lot of apps that are actually accessible, often what happens is when they push an update, it sort of goes for a toss. And that probably happens like while there was a team that took care of accessibility in the initial development phase. When they were pushing the update, there was no QA, there was no quality assurance where a person with disability could test it. So from what I want to understand is that how much of a difference does representation make? Like, I know again this is a very dumb question, but if you could share your own experience, how has it your experience been? Because you've worked with people across the spectrum, people with various disability. What kind of a difference does it make when you have people on your engineering team, on your design team who have disability? Because it's one of the other things I want this room to take away with, because a lot of these problems don't get highlighted because often we are not speaking to the end user herself, right, who may be facing all these challenges.
That's a really good question, Chitranshu. So first of all, if we break down and talk in a layman term, is that if we talk about accessibility and we talk about representation, so the stepping stone for accessibility is to get a person who themselves you can recognize and feel that empathy and what exactly they need from that perspective. To give a very basic example, let's imagine we have a French e-commerce website. We need to build that. We have designers, we have developers, but it's none of a use if you don't know a knowledge of French and the culture of France, right? So in that case, if I compare that with an PWD person, if the culture, the language, and the pain points, those are the real persons who can showcase what exactly they are feeling through and the common issues and the best practices. And if I want to break down, there are 3 different aspects which a person of disability you can give his or his perspective. First is your ATs, assistive technology usage. So it's very technical. So AT is something, it can be anything. It can be a screen reader, something assisting you as a technology which helps you in to understand and perceive that particular information or maybe access any software website. So if I talk about assistive technology, say it's a screen reader. So we have different screen readers, and such kind of screen readers are available in your phone, your MacBook, which people are not aware of. So everybody, I hope everyone out here has a mobile device. Maybe it's Android or iOS. So I just want that from today itself, if you are not aware, so you can just go to your mobile and check it out. You'll be having a talkback in your Android and voiceover in your iOS. So it's very easy, but it's just more of we are not much aware about that. So first of all, your AT experience. So when there is an end user inside your own team, so they will let you know their end user experience, which we can't feel, because I am into accessibility since past 8 years and I'm testing. But I can't put myself in their shoes. Okay, I can mimic that, but not exactly 100%. For that, we need some persons with disabilities. And people have a certain myth, that disability is just being blind. It's not that. It's not restricted to that. There are various disabilities. One is your color blindness. Second is your hearing impairment. Other is your cognitive disabilities. Like we have seen like a very good movie like Taris. I mean, that was dyslexia. So it's like kind of a slow learning. So it's not, because whenever I've talked, I have seen the trend. Usually when I talk about disability, people are like, okay, somebody is blind. But no, it's not restricted to that. They're like, even if we talk about disabilities, there are different kind of disabilities as well: permanent, temporary, situational, and there is a long list. Now, first of all, they will give you a real user time experience. And if I talk about second point, it will be the best practices. Because, PWD are the persons who, because being a tester, right, I come from a background, okay, I'll do my job, it's like 8 hours job, I'll go back. But people who have disability, they have to live their life since the point when they wake up until the clock when they sleep. So there are different parameters. Like suppose I want to, I want to just order my food. I just want to, travel outside, have a good vacation. So these are like the bit and pieces of, the understanding of being disabled person and how, we can cater that. And thirdly, they give us an aspect like what are the best practices and from the usability perspective. Suppose there is a website and there is a little very small icon, right? Being a person, I can just see that, and using my mouse, I can, go there and access that. But let's consider a person who has a cognitive disability or somebody who has a motor disability. So if I talk about motor disability, somebody who can't use the mouse, so they have their sensation in the mouse, so they are not able to, access access the mouse. In such a case, we need to ensure that particular icon is operable using keyboard. So this is one aspect. Now this is the world of data, and data representation is one of the very important key aspects. So if we talk about data representation, there are different type of graphs and pie charts, right? And we usually see these pie charts have very attractive and colors, right? So suppose there's a red and green color given in a pie chart. So for me, it's fine, but for a blind user, color doesn't exist. Shape sizes do not exist. Like, how to give that information? So here we need to ensure the information is not only reliable on the color, and as well we need to take care of a different disability, that is like color blindness. So for a person who's a color blind, red and green are not differentiated. So these are such similar small parameters and aspects which we need to ensure. But we have a person with disability, they can give you a glance and an aspect like how exactly these situations are. And if I talk about my organization, so I work for VMware, and there we have different PWD people with various disabilities, like somebody who is blind by birth, somebody who is color vision problem, and somebody who have hearing impaired, so that we have different personas. Because if we have different personas, then we get to know, okay, where the real issue is going on, and you can go to the crux, and you can build in that environment. So these are the people to give that particular last check mark, okay, this is ready to go.
Correct. Yeah. Shakul, I want to come back to you. One of the myth with accessibility is also that it only serves people with disability, right? The thing with accessibility is, in general, it makes the app better, right? So for example, if as people grow old, they lose sight, a lot of these features work for them also. Something as simple as a reader mode that a lot of journalists in this room will be familiar with. Now, while a reader mode as a feature could be designed for someone keeping in mind visual impairment, but a reader mode also works if you're looking for an experience without any clutter, without any ad. So could you just shed some light on that also, that how accessibility in itself makes a better product, and it's not like a feature that is specifically to serve people with disability?
Thanks for the question, Chitranshu. Obviously, it is not a feature specifically for people with disability. I'll give you some very simple examples. So when we talk about accessibility of information, we basically talk about alternative formats, like how can we consume information in different formats, which basically eases out this process for a lot of people. So for example, if you are presenting a news article in simpler languages, for example, your article is in English and you are trying to do text summarization or text simplification, whereas you are also providing the same article in simple language, specifically for people who have cognitive disabilities and who find difficult to comprehend the long articles in very difficult kind of a language. This is also an addition for those for whom English is a second language, right? Because they would have otherwise discriminated because you are in largely English medium news media outlet. But if you just kind of simplify your language, you did it for people with learning disabilities or cognitive disabilities, but it is also important for those who have English as a second language. Secondly, when you try to make your website or portal accessible, or when you do this accessible, it is talking about the business use case over here. It's a huge factor for SEO, right? So for example, if you have an image, right, and you describe that image in alt text or image description. So basically you put up some characters, some words around those images. So when SEO works, SEO doesn't consider it as an accessibility kind of thing. It catches out those words and characters. Or in your news outlet, your portal is highlighted on top of others who have not described those images. Similarly for other things. So when you try to make your stuff accessible, it's a business use case for you. Because I was reading another interesting paper over there. I read that if your offering is accessible, your sales increases by 2.9x and your profit increases by 4.1x. So it's a huge business case. And also, as you rightly mentioned, Chitranshu, for elderly people who kind of who are not disabled by birth, or they were not disabled in their young age, but as and when they grow up, is a large population of our society. And India is going to, right now is a youth country, but if you talk about the stats, by 2050 our population is going to decline, and we are soon be becoming a country like Japan, where we have a lot of old age people, right? In couple of decades or something like that. So it is also a very helpful feature for those the elderly population, those who have language disabilities, language difficulties, along with people with disabilities. So, yeah, it's a widely known thing that you can incorporate. Just giving you another simple example, which is not from news outlets. So many of you would have traveled in Delhi Metro, right? Delhi Metro incorporated this announcement for all the stations and everything. But this was initially incorporated to keep in mind that there would be some blind traveler. But no, right now people just put up their books and whatever, or they just talk to each other, and they are completely reliant on those audio feedback. And whenever my station will come up, I'll get to hear those audio, and I don't have to look up which station has come up. So when you incorporate accessibility, you are actually opening up your offerings for a larger audience in general.
That's a very good example. Prashant, this is obviously not a problem that's unique to news. We were earlier discussing how even the likes of Zomato, Swiggy are not really accessible. And these are companies who are unicorns, who are sitting on, they are not short on resources or engineering talent to solve these problems. A lot of the accessibility products are actually driven by companies at a US base. So basically companies like Google, companies like Facebook, Apple, these have been at the forefront of accessibility. A lot of it, I think, is because of lived experience also. Like, for example, a lot of people might know that the reason why the Facebook logo is blue, because Mark Zuckerberg is actually colorblind. Or one of the reasons why Microsoft has invested a lot in accessibility, because Satya Nadella, who's the CEO, he had a son who had cerebral palsy, who unfortunately died. And so it also comes from lived experience. But what I find interesting is that a lot of the QA, quality assurance and testing for large multinational companies, which is then outsourced to the likes of TCS and Infosys, is actually done in Noida and other in India. So how is it that Indian companies that have resources, that have talent, are actually not doing anything about it? Do you think, like Shakul was mentioning, there are not enough penalties in the law as compared to America, or do you think it's just a matter of intent? Like where do you think is the problem? Because clearly we have the engineering talent, because we are shipping, we are testing it for companies overseas, but we are not doing it for products based out of India.
So yes, so these large Indian companies are providing accessibility services to clients outside India, mainly because like it's a kind of a business. They have been asked to do so, and the legal setup over there in US and Europe is such that if your app or website is not accessible, then anybody can complain, and you may have to pay very, very heavy fine over there. So and in India, I think like the legal setup has been very lenient, and it has not been a very stringent requirement. Although it is changing, and I want to inform everybody that so we had a new Disability Act in 2016. After that, rules have been created. And thankfully, Indian government came out with guidelines for Indian websites, and also which contains some mobile content guidance also. And there was a 2-year time period for everybody, including private entities, to make their ICT tools accessible. And that time period expired in June earlier this year. And now it is possible for any person with disabilities to file a complaint with the Disability Commissioner Court, or even go to a regular court and file a complaint. And the fines could be in the range of, just like, fines are not that much, only 10,000 rupees to 5 lakh rupees. But I think an adverse decision will greatly affect the goodwill of the company. So maybe that is the reason, or that why everybody here should be thinking about making their tools, websites, apps accessible. And of course, we have already been saying that it is the right thing to do. It is a business case. It improves the SEO. It greatly improves the SEO. You can go back and research on it, because to make your website or app accessible, you will provide some image descriptions. That additional content is picked up by the search engines. You will structure your page as per accessibility guidelines, and all that structuring, all that information is also picked up by search engines. So and then millions and millions who are not able to use your app to order food or to do some shopping will be able to do it. So it is definitely a very big win-win case, I think, to make things accessible.
Correct. So Vineet, we are almost running out of time, so I'll give you the last question. News, especially like independent digital news organizations, are often struggling with resources, right? So for example, and this is something I can say with a lot of personal experience, often when you ship a product, it instantly compared to, say, the likes of Spotify or Amazon and so on and so forth. And I'm saying this because I know, as someone who works on product, this will be at the back of a lot of people's mind who work on product. Could you explain, there is a myth on accessibility that making our apps and website accessible is actually an enormous task. Now, it's both yes and no. Like, for example, if you're starting a new product, it's a lot more easier to make it accessible. But I want you to shed a light about that. If there is a digital news organization which already has a website or app, what is the kind of development effort that is needed to sort of make it accessible and make it accessible for people with disability?
So first of all, Chitranshu, Newslaundry can do that with a 2-member tech team that at least tells you that, you know, it's completely possible if there is the intent to make this happen. And here most of the people at least feel that accessibility is very expensive. So, which is completely not true. But see, if you're doing the initial setup, like probably if your logo, style, fonts, alt tags, basic navigation features, initially it's hard, I would say. But post that, it becomes easy. Like, to maintain it, if you continuously take user feedback, put in a process in place, I don't think it is at all difficult. It's just probably that the engineering team needs to learn and put things as a process. And accessibility is a process. Like simple things like typing prediction, Shakul mentioned audio. I'm very sure everyone uses magnifiers, colors, contrasts, and this is for non-disabled people also, right? So this is part of the process of some of these global teams. So even if Indian engineering teams can keep this as part of the process, it's not at all expensive. And only the initial bit, when you're revamping, it might require a lot of effort. Post that, it would taper. And once you put this as a process, I think it's completely possible. And I think Newslaundry has already shown that's possible.
Thank you. I'll open for questions. But before that, if you can play the demo video, and then we can take questions from the audience.
Over the last 6 months, Newslaundry has been working to integrate assistive technology with our website and app. We've called it Newsable, and it launches this November. Here's a quick preview of all the changes coming your way. Screen reader compatibility. Users with visual impairments will be able to navigate through Newslaundry's website and app via VoiceOver and screen reader apps.
Tap back on. Share, shares the current story a podcast button. Bookmark this, bookmarks the current story button. Report. Exclusive, Mumbai meet traders quest for asylum in Ireland, over attack, sweeping cow vigilantism.
What you just saw is an example of TalkBack enabled on our Android app. It'll work the same way for iOS and web. Newsable makes Newslaundry's website and app compatible with accessibility modes and settings available in operating systems across devices. For example, if a user clicks on Apple system settings and toggles between dark and light system themes, that will be reflected on our website and the app. Users can choose between high contrast and low contrast website designs. This can tweak the contrast between text and background for better readability. Too often, the user experience requires someone to click on things with a mouse or touchpad to move forward. Newsable ensures that our website is completely accessible via a keyboard without these clicks. Color filters and contrast. Newsable offers color themes for those with visual impairments. Opting for a blue-yellow filter will change the blue accent color of the website. This helps users with tritanopia, color blindness for blue and yellow. Transcripts and subtitles. We are rolling out read aloud functionality for all tech stories.
Exactly how environment friendly are Delhi's e-rickshaws? Not very.
This is accompanied with closed captions for all videos.
Welcome to Newslaundry interview. Today we have with us Priyanka Chaturvedi. She's Rajya Sabha MP and Deputy Leader of Shiv Sena.
Voice search. Search by speaking with just a click.
Manipur.
Users can apply these filters for better search results. Customizable fonts. Newsable offers defined typography and dyslexia-friendly fonts to improve overall text readability. Newsable, making news accessible to everyone.
Great. So before we take up questions quickly, this is not a proprietary tool or software that we've built. If any, a lot of my colleagues who have actually worked on this, Rishabh, Danish, and a lot of other colleagues are actually here. So if you're genuinely curious, what is the kind of effort that is needed to make a website or app accessible, we are here. I have everyone's email address on the panel. If you want to reach out to anyone for testing or just for a consultation, please contact us. I can share. My email address is chitranshu@newslaundry. So I'm hoping at least this will also inspire other news organizations to make their website and app accessible.
But Chitranshu, just wanted to add that I'm very sure even non-disabled Newslaundry subscribers would benefit out.
Yes, of course. Yes, yes. Yeah. Yes.
Hi, Vineet. I'm really glad you mentioned about sign language because I think that was one of the important aspect that was missing from the discourse about accessibility. Even in the news, just to give a little bit of background, it's really great that Newslaundry has taken this initiative, like at least one kind of accessibility we have. But again, because we don't have deaf people in the room, I'm taking the liberty of not actually following the ethics. I should not be asking this, they should be asking this. The thing is, in our country, there are more than 6 million deaf people who are using sign language. And unfortunately, while they're schooling, there is no actual education happening. That's the reason they don't actually get to read and write properly, even though they would have the qualifications for it. And that's one of the reasons they're not able to access the news. Apart from the fact that they cannot hear, the fact that even the written text is not exactly accessible. So closed captions is not the most preferable mode of accessing information for the majority of deaf people, and we're very closely connected to them. They tend to start their own news channels. There are 2 important news channels which they have been started by deaf people themselves. What really happens, it divides the news content into 2 basic things, right? It is, obviously it's led by deaf, so it's good, but even they don't really have all the content, right? They are getting content from some print or some source, which may be biased, which may not be biased. Again, they don't have the liberty of choosing from a wide range of materials. So what happens is that the content they are getting is so filtered and so polarized sometimes that it's impossible to even influence them to say that there is another kind of content available. So what I'm trying to say is that when accessibility can mean different things for different people. For deaf people in our country, mostly it means translation in Indian Sign Language. So just having text available might not be the best solution for the deaf people.
No, I think this is a fair point as such, and a lot of people have this notion that having, let's say, all text or closed captioning solves a lot of problem, but just want to give a deaf context there. Not many people are fluent in English as such, or even written English. And for them, sign language is the only way. And probably what you are also referring in sometimes what is verifiable news also, because if a deaf person is only listening to one version of the news, they think that that's true. And there have been cases of fake news and some of these things happening in which, you know, verifiable information is very hard, and because the content is also not there in sign language. So obviously like for example, I think I remember DD News had this sign language bulletin once a week or once a day, as such. So obviously that would be the best solution for the deaf community, and not many people would even understand all text and closed caption.
I'm sorry, the best solution would be to actually partner with these deaf people who know how news should be translated. Just having an interpreter is also not a great solution. Most of the people associate sign language with the DD News, but even those interpreters were not clear.
Yeah,
Deaf people could not understand that news. So the thing is, it's very important to involve them in the discussion, in the discourse, in the panel. I think it's very important to have
you
them.
highlighted a very, like even some of the public events which the Prime Minister and like most of the government does, there have been clear highlights by the deaf community that the interpreter has not interpreted things correctly. So yeah, having a voice at the table helps.
First of all, it's a very good initiative to have this session on the disability and the problems, because very seldom we discuss about these issues. Now my question is about like the employability. Like let's say if a person with disability has to work with an organization like Newslaundry, you know, every disability has got different requirements and all. So how is it how can we best make the newsrooms sensitized towards the needs and inclusive for persons with disability? Because there is a stigma attached with disability. Like whatever a non-disabled person can do, I may do it slowly, but that does not should not undermine my competence. Now, how will this mindset change in newsrooms and people when the needs are not people are not sensitized only towards the needs?
Correct. So I'll obviously get Vineet to answer some of this because he actually runs a platform. But this is a fair point. I think news organizations in general struggle with representation across the board. We hardly have people with disability. We do really bad when it comes to gender and caste representation as well. But that's it's just we have to be more aware to hire more people, because for example, organizations abroad which have done really well on accessibility. So for example, if you look at New York Times and Washington Post, these are websites that are very accessible, because not only they have an accessibility team, they have engineers who are dedicatedly working on accessibility, they have newsrooms, they have offices where their offices are inclusive enough, they hire people from the community. So I don't think there are two ways about it. I as someone who works with a media organization, I know we do a very bad job of it, but I think we also have to move past than just accepting it. I think we really have to walk the talk on that also. Hopefully pushing us something like this also makes us accountable. I at least that's the positive that I take it, right? If we are taking accountability and saying that we have actually now have a news website and app, it also opens us to scrutiny to people from the community that, hey, this was the easy step that you could have taken. Where is it reflecting in your hiring structures? So I think it will happen slowly and gradually. Do media organizations have to do a better job of it? Hell yeah.
No, I think you have added it beautifully. I just wanted to tell that even news media houses are probably also taking like, at least with disability, the inspiration route, like which typically a lot of people call inspiration porn, right? Like just highlighting the sufferings of people with disabilities, or just but not taking that into their own action. Like you'll have news media talking about inaccessibility of ramps and inaccessibility of public platforms, but when it comes to their own platform, which is inaccessible largely. So, and same way with hiring, as such, like there are enough examples in the West to say that people with disabilities can do as good as anybody else in any function. So there's so many examples here. So yeah, that needs to be done.
Just to add a last bit. Just to add a last bit into it, like imagine, first of all, as Chitranshu and Vineet, they both of them captured everything, but it is very essential for you as an organization to conduct inclusion workshops where you kind of make people aware. As I pointed out in the beginning, right, to make your team, your the management, especially higher management, aware about the accessibility and the diverse need that people with disabilities might have. And once you have employed some of folks with disabilities, it's very simple. Just ask them what their needs are, and just ask, you are the first person, or we have never seen someone with this kind of specific disabilities. So if you have any reasonable accommodation, we are happy to help. These kind of conversation actually help a lot. You don't have to check all the check boxes. It's just the conversation and largely the willingness to do things to make things easier for everyone.
Great. Thank you, everyone.